Brian, Tristan?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Tucker. Yeah, so we're on different sides of the political spectrum, obviously. But I have a question to you about political polarization in the country. Obviously, with the election coming up, it's going to get much worse. I think both sides agree to that. How do you think we can better foster more constructive conversations between people with different political views? And do you think you've contributed to polarization in any way?
Well, I'm sure I've contributed all kinds of bad trends in this country. You know, polarization, bad haircuts. I mean, I'm trying not to deny my sins. I supported the Iraq War in 2003. So, I've got a lot to apologize for, and I've tried to apologize for it. But I, you want the honest answer? The first step is let's just agree to stop talking about race. I mean, that conversation is designed to divide us. I think it's intentional. I think there's a very specific purpose to it, but it hasn't helped. We've been doing it for many years, and there's kind of no more meaningful legislation to pass on that subject. There's only wounds to pick and to inflame and lies to tell. And you wonder, again, why we're being encouraged to talk about race all the time. It's not wholesome, it's not helpful, and it makes rational conversation impossible. It's also boring because yes, there are racial differences, but they're not as profound as lots of other differences. Income differences. If I make $1 billion and you make $50,000, we're far more different than we are if we're different colors. That's just true. And so we're not getting anywhere. It's only dividing us. And people say, "Oh, I want a conversation about race." No, you don't. No one wants a conversation about race. No one allows a conversation about race. And if they did, that probably wouldn't help us either. So let's just agree. Let's do a mutual ceasefire on race. And then, honestly, you will see a lot of the differences just recede because then we'll be talking about economics. And the second we talk about economics, then you will find that most people are on the same side. They don't want to pay $11 for a dozen eggs. They don't think actually you should have a country run by billionaires. That's not healthy. It's not. And I'm sorry, I'm here because a billionaire has guaranteed free speech on this platform, and I'll forever be grateful for that. But you don't want every part of your civic life controlled by people just because they're rich. Like that's not democracy for one thing, and it's super unhealthy for another. It's not even feudalism; it's beneath feudalism. So anyway, that's the first thing I would do is just if you just banned. I don't want to ban anything, but if you had a gentleman's agreement that we're not resolving anything, racial differences are actually not as big a deal as we make them out to be. It's not the beginning and end of every fucking story what color you are. It's absurd. And we're just not going to talk about it. We're going to take race off federal form. We're going to stop counting people by race because it totally dehumanizes a person to classify him by race. He didn't choose his race. It has nothing to do with anything he did. It's how would you like if we classified people by height and then argued about short people versus tall people? All of us could see what a fruitless conversation that would be. And hopefully, if we're rational, we'd stop having it and just accept that tall people are a little different from short people, but not that different. They're still people. And then we could have a good conversation about things that A, we can change, and B, that we have in common. What do you think of that?
No, I think those are decent points. Obviously, I don't
How are
think
they
we should.
decent?
Uh, well, I think where I differ is that there are times where I think it's important to speak about race. I think that America in general they over speak about race. I think that people accuse others of being racist too easily, and when they do that, they actually it's causing more harm than good. It's making real racists seem less racist.
But let me just ask you a question then. I mean, you've taken a lot of assumptions on faith. I noticed in that sentence. But can you think of any material improvement to the United States that we have achieved over the last 10 years by talking about race? We passed the Civil Rights Act. We've done a whole lot on that question for 60 years, 70 years now. But in the last 10 years, it feels like we've kind of run out of things to talk about. It's almost exclusively used as a cudgel. But maybe I'm missing something. Can you think of some way where a large group, millions of Americans, have benefited materially from our quote conversation about race?
In the last 10 years, I would say that hasn't been much. There hasn't been much accomplished. I don't think we are anywhere further along racially than we were 10 years ago.
Right.
And I'd agree with you there. Does that mean that if somebody does something horrible to a certain race, if we should just not talk about it. I don't think that should be the case.
Well, I don't know. I mean, maybe it might be worth treating people as people. So I guess implicit in your question, and I really appreciate this, is the desire to see the country come together and people stop arguing with each other over pointless stuff and be a nation again, rather than just 360 million disgruntled individuals. Which I think that's what you're saying, and I'm totally for that. Okay, but any talk about race, like by definition, reduces somebody to a physical characteristic. And I thought we thought that was bad. I still do. But B, that is like a recipe for dividing people. It's absolutely a recipe. Why wouldn't we emphasize, even in the case of crime, our commonality? One person hurt another person, not a white hurt a black or a black hurt a white, because the implication there is all blacks hurt all whites or all whites hurt all blacks. And that's not true. That's not helpful. So why don't we just say a person hurt another person, we're against hurting people. We're going to punish him on the basis of the harm he caused. I mean, that seems like a much more, quote, liberal approach, but a much more humane and constructive approach. And I can promise you, if we did that, we would be talking about stuff that matters. Like, how is this war helping anybody? Is our tax rate fair? It doesn't seem fair to me. I can't get anyone to listen to that argument because they're all like, well, shut up, racist. I mean, you know what I mean?
Candace, I don't know if